Welcome back. We're talking about the conflict in Yemen. Still with us, Nadwa Al-Dawsari is a researcher on Yemen. Baraa Shiban is with the human rights organization Reprieve. And Gareth Porter is an independent investigative journalist. Let's go to London and Baraa. Baraa, the UN coordinator for humanitarian affairs in Yemen recently talked about the situation there, the situation that's affecting millions of civilians. Let's take a listen to what he said. Okay, we'll get that in a moment. But you've just been there. You've talked to people there. What can you tell us about the kinds of problems that people are facing? You know, do they have access to food, shelter, things like medicines, water?
First of all, allow me to reply quickly to Mr. Gareth there at the studio. This is kind of the problem whenever we say many journalists, many viewers, many observers are not willing to really understand what's the problem. When he tried to explain that this is simply just a war supposedly waged by Saudi and it's like a rivalry between Saudi and Iran. This war started 6 months at least before the Saudi intervention even happened. So whenever we try to bring the discussion down to the real root cause of the problem, suddenly we get shifted away by those many other factors that actually happened later on to the conflict. In order to understand, we need to decide what is the role of Saleh, what is the role of the Houthis, and who are actually the local actors of this conflict. Moving quickly to your question, it depends actually where are you living right now in the country. Mainly, the main problem is that even if
Baraa, I'm going to stop you.
Access.
Okay, one moment. I'm going to stop you right there because we do have that sound from the UN coordinator for humanitarian affairs in Yemen. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
What you have now is a situation of a 23-month conflict which has slowed down the ability for people to have a productive capacity. Fishermen can't fish, farmers can't farm, civil servants don't get paid. So the ability for them to cope with that crisis has been exacerbated by the conflict. And so what you have is people having to make life and death decisions. Do you feed your child or your children, or do you pay for medical treatment for the sick child? And that's a daily call for many families.
So there we have that UN official. They're laying it out very starkly, the kind of choices people have to make. You were telling us about that. Go on.
Yeah, so as I was saying, it depends on, in Yemen right now, where are you living? And literally, the main problem is that many people can't afford buying food. So the food could be there, but actually it has tripled the price. And many people, if in the absence of like receiving salaries, there's no social welfare. The social welfare has stopped since 2015. People can't afford to buy food anymore. And of course, you have many of the, if you want to get a real medical health care, for example, you need to go to the private sector. And all of us know when you go to the private sector, you need money. And at the moment, the people, even the people who had money before the conflict, are quickly running out of cash. It depends on again, as I said, where are you? In some areas of the country, they need food, and this is like literally packages of food. And in some areas of the country, they need access to fund. They need access to money so they can buy their next meal.
And Nadwa, if you look at this battle, you know, it's very indiscriminate the way civilians have been victim to this war. Let's listen to one civilian victim who talked recently. Let's watch this.
I saw a flashing light and smoke, lots of smoke. I saw many people lying on the floor dead. Half of them were burnt. My uncle then carried me. I was burnt. My face, hands, and my feet were very burnt, and my uncle carried me.
So we have these drone strikes, sometimes these one-off raids, but there's been another very, I think, insidious development. The Department of Defense here in the United States is considering a proposal that would designate Yemen a formal battlefield zone.
That would be a huge mistake on the U.S. side, because although this war has been raging for 2.5 years now, it began in September 2014, Yemen is not in a complete void. It's not in a vacuum. there are areas where you see functioning local governments. Yes, they have, they're facing major challenges and they need a lot of support. But like in Aden, for example, the local authorities and the local security have managed to improve the security situation. Same thing in Ma'arib. There has been a lot of improvement in terms of infrastructure, health, education. So there are areas where you can help Yemen build a minimum level of governance, and only governance can help Yemen get out of this war. Anything military, and we've seen the Saudis have tried to do this for 2 years now, and they failed. Any military solution in Yemen is doomed to fail. Not only to fail, but to make the situation a lot worse. And so I would discourage against this decision, if in fact it's being discussed in the White House.
All right, Gareth, what are your thoughts on that? If this is true, if this happens, if Yemen is declared a battlefield zone, that would allow for more intensified attacks on the country.
Well, of course, I agree totally that this would be a terrible mistake, and one that I'm sorry to say is characteristic of the Pentagon. That's the kind of thinking that they constantly indulge in. But I want to come back to the humanitarian catastrophe, really, in Yemen, which is really far worse than anything that we saw in Syria, in terms of not so much the victims of the direct deaths from bombing, but really the deaths and the very grave specter of starvation to death because of the bombing's indirect effects, particularly the blockade that it has imposed on Yemen from outside in terms of shipments of food, fuel, and medicine. But also, of course, the destruction of infrastructure, which has made it impossible to reach many people with aid of various kinds. And now, I'm sorry to say, this war has morphed into really primarily a war of imposing economic suffering on the population, in part by depriving them of the ability to use cash. I mean, the Hadi government has taken the step, of course, pushed by the Saudis, of taking the central bank away from Sana'a and moving it to moving it to Aden, which is very, very far away from most of the population, and makes it impossible for the majority of the population of Yemen to access sources of cash. And that's why you have such a terrible problem of people not being able to buy food right now. The economy is in a downward spiral, and this is a very severe crisis, which is really as bad as the bombing, as a source of suffering at this point, and is bound to become much worse in the very near future without political diplomatic intervention from outside at this point.
Baraa, what has been your experience there? You know, as we just heard Gareth tell us, as well as the UN official telling us there, that, you know, he brought it down to a very simple level. He says, look, fishermen can't fish, farmers can't farm, people can't work. What effect is that having there?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Nadwa mentioned. There is a good examples of good governance at a local level. Needless to mention, Ma'arib, where they have been able to run the governorate quite efficiently, actually, for almost 2 years. There is a clear problem in the access of people they have to money, to cash simply. And now regarding if I would like to go to the technical details, I think I would disagree again with Gareth. Actually, moving the central bank to Aden was quite necessary because the central bank in Sana'a was not able to deliver any more salaries. Right now, this is the first month, actually, that the public sector started to receive salaries. The problem is that with the humanitarian aid, you don't want to make the whole entire nation dependent on humanitarian aid. The people who are already in the public sector or were in the private sector need to continue and resume their work so they can actually access and buy their own food without the need for humanitarian aid organizations to step in and fill that vacuum.
Okay, Gareth, I've got 20 seconds for you to respond.
Well, I don't think that this is the view of most people who have observed this problem in Yemen, even outsiders who have
Right.
been commenting on it. I just wouldn't, I don't think that's correct.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
where we're going to have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for joining us.